wealth beyond measure, life without end, wisdom of the cosmos. Throughout history, the most brilliant minds have pursued these impossible dreams, scouring vast amounts of ancient knowledge for the key to unlocking them all. Well, they found it. I'm Carol Ann, and welcome to the InBetween. Human nature, a subject that's been hotly debated by scholars since scholars have been a thing. Is it some immutable characteristic that we're born with that we can never transcend? Or are there signposts within our history that can guide us to the ultimate enlightenment if we only stop to read them? To understand these metaphorical signposts, we have to take a few steps back. Brief history. Let's go all the way back to 332 BC when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. What do you do when you want to assimilate a different culture into your own? It's called syncretism, a process where elements from different cultures or religions merge to form a new tradition. Like Easter season in Guatemala. Catholic traditions blend with Mayan practices through alfombras, colorful carpets of sawdust and flowers made for Holy Week processions, a Christian ritual, but inspired by Mayan sacred designs used to honor deities, with a little bit of Spanish colonial influence thrown in for good measure. So the Greeks merged their god Hermes, the messenger of the gods, as well as the god of wisdom, travel, trade, and trickery, with the Egyptian god Thoth, who is the scribe for the gods, as well as the god of wisdom, knowledge, writing, magic, and the moon, creating a blended figure named Hermes Trismegistus. Around 500 years later, this new god on the block had a book written about him called the Corpus Hermeticum. Not like a biography, but a collection of philosophical dialogues he supposedly had with other people, both living and not, which laid the foundation for the philosophy of Hermeticism, blending Greek philosophy, Egyptian mysticism, and later on, Islamic and Renaissance ideas, trying to understand the secrets of the universe, achieve spiritual enlightenment, and on the more practical earthly side, transform matter like lead into gold. Great! Not so great. Here's the problem. Way back then, if you were not a noteworthy figure in the philosophy world, but you had something important to say, you just put somebody else's name on it who had more street cred than you, which ends up to be a huge problem. Because everyone did that, we have no idea who actually wrote anything or exactly when. So Hermeticism kind of percolates along for a couple hundred more years until we get to the 600 to 800 AD time frame. That time frame, which is also known as the Islamic Golden Age, sees two different Arabic books. Hang with me here, we're going deep. The Secret Book of Secrets and the Book of the Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature, also known as the Book of Balanas, the Wise on the Causes, that both talk about a guy named Balanas. The story goes that Balanas discovered an entrance under a statue of Hermes. He goes in to find either an old man or a corpse, depending on which version you read, holding an emerald tablet. That's right, the Emerald Tablet of Legend. Now, I'm going to pause here for just a minute to point out that there is the Emerald Tablet, singular, and there is the Emerald Tablets, plural. What's the difference? Huge! But we will get back to that in just a bit. Until then, back to the Emerald Tablet. So these books, the Secret Book of Secrets and the Book of the Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature, also known as the Book of Balanas, the Wise on the Causes, are the first actual mention of the tablet. Now, Balanas was not a real guy. He's made up. The most popular belief is that he's a fictionalized version of the 1st century Greek philosopher Apollonius of Tyana, which is interesting because Apollonius didn't seem to have anything to do with any of this. And those first two books that mention Balanas are both attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. So again, we have no idea who wrote them. So now we have an origin story for the Emerald Tablet, also known as the Tabula Smaragdina. And those first two books also contained what they reported as the actual text of the tablet, which they may have gotten from a Christian monk named Sagius of Nablus, who translated it from Syriac into Arabic, but neither of them happened to mention what happened to the tablet. They only talk about what's written on it. Still with me? Don't worry, it gets way easier from here. So, what's written on it? Actually, not that much.
'Tis true without lying, certain and most true. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracles of one only thing. And as all things have been and arose from one, by the mediation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is its father, the moon its mother, the wind hath carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse. The father of all perfection in the whole world is here. Its force or power is entire if it be converted into earth. Separate thou the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, gently with great industry. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and again it descends to the earth and receives the force of things superior and inferior. By this means you shall have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. Its force is above all force, for it vanquishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. So was the world created. From this are and do come admirable adaptations, whereof the means, or process, is here in this. Hence I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended.
By around 1140 AD, the Emerald Tablet text made its way to Europe when Hugo of Santalla translated it from Arabic into Latin, allowing European alchemists like Roger Bacon to read it. These alchemists who were trying to make the Philosopher's Stone, a magical item or concoction that would turn metals into gold and grant eternal life, they thought, this is it. These are the instructions we've been waiting for. Just so everyone's up to speed, an alchemist is someone who studies the science of transmutation, or trying to change things into something better, be that turning lead into gold or turning mortal man immortal. We will talk more about the Philosopher's Stone a little later, but for now, just know that it was, and some say still is, the Holy Grail of alchemy. In the 14th century, an alchemist named Ortolanus wrote a big explanation of the tablet, saying it explained how to make the stone, which influenced other alchemists for centuries. People like John Dee and Edward Kelly in the 1580s, and even Isaac Newton in the 1680s. If you've been watching us for a while, you may remember hearing about John Dee and Edward Kelly and their friend, Emperor and King Rudolph II. Rudolph was highly interested in the occult and owned both the Voynich manuscript and the Codex Gigas, two very intriguing books which we've already talked about in previous episodes. If you'd like to hear more about those, the links to those episodes are in the description. It is rumored that Rudolph actually acquired the Voynich manuscript from John Dee, but regardless, the partnership between Rudolph and the dynamic duo of Dee and Kelly is well established. Both Dee and Kelly were interested in alchemy and the Emerald Tablet. Dee was more interested in the spiritual side of things and talking to angels. Kelly, who was the guy who was supposed to be able to put Dee in touch with said angels, also said to Rudolph, "Hey, I know how to make the Philosopher's Stone." Rudolph said, "Great, here's a lab and a stipend. Make one for me." Tangent warning, but it's a juicy one. So there these guys are hanging out in the king's court. Dee wants to talk to the angels, and Kelly is his connection. So one day in 1587, Kelly tells Dee, "Hey, the angels told me we should swap wives for a night." Dee, wasn't really all that keen on the idea at first, but he trusted Kelly and wanted to do whatever the angels said to do. So they swap for a night. However, the fallout isn't pretty, with Dee's wife, Jane Dee, becoming distressed, you think? And those two head back to England by 1589. Moral of the story, human nature never changes. And obviously, Edward Kelly didn't get the whole spiritual transformation part of alchemy. Okay, back to the Emerald Tablet. So Dee leaves and Kelly stays, but Rudolph is getting pissed. All this time and money and no stone. So in 1591, he throws Kelly in prison for non-performance. By around 1597 or 1598, Kelly's had enough of prison life and tries to escape, apparently by trying to climb down from a high tower. He falls, and his injuries lead to his death soon after. But again, back to the tablet. In 1669, a German alchemist by the name of Henrik Brand, who also studied the tablet and was trying his hand at creating the elusive Philosopher's Stone, was lucky enough to find 2 sugar mamas to fund his experiments based on the work of those before him. He manages to distill 1,500 gallons of urine down to a white waxy substance that glowed in the dark. Was it the legendary Philosopher's Stone? No. But he accidentally made the first discovery of a chemical element, phosphorus. And even Isaac Newton in the late 1600s got hooked on the Emerald Tablet craze. So much so that he even went back to Hugo of Santalla's Latin translation and made his own English translation. Fast forward to the 20th century, as far as we know, no one has been able to crack the Emerald Tablet code, either for never-ending wealth or immortality, as far as we know. So how exactly does an Emerald Tablet, with writing that no one can make heads or tails of what it actually means, get connected to the idea of a magical stone that can turn lead to gold and or grant immortality? Well, actually, the search for the transformational panacea predates the Emerald Tablet. By the 3rd century AD, alchemists like Zosimas of Minneapolis, at least he was smart enough to sign his own book, are already talking about a universal substance for transmutation and healing. Roll on to the 8th century, and we get another Arabic alchemist by the name of Jabir ibn Hayyan, who writes the Book of the Elements of Foundation, which, while talking about the tablet, explicitly links its ideas to the concept of elixir, a universal transformative substance, which, if you missed that one, is where we get the word elixir. And that was all she wrote. The idea of the tablet being the instruction to create the rock or liquid or whatever it turned out to be became just accepted alchemist canon, with the name the Philosopher's Stone becoming attached to it in about the 12th century and popular in the 13th. And the rest, as they say, is history. So now that we know what the Emerald Tablet singular is all about, where do the Emerald Tablets plural fit into all of this? They don't. I know, that's a pretty strong statement, so let's unpack this. In a nutshell, the Emerald Tablets are a series of 12 separate tablets that record the wisdom of the ancient god Thoth as to how the universe works. This information was relayed to Maurice Doreal, founder of the Brotherhood of the White Temple, to be shared with all of humanity. According to Doreal, Thoth is an Atlantean king/god who survives the destruction of Atlantis and settles in Egypt. I'm not going to go into the full history of Thoth. The full text of all the Emerald Tablets is linked in the description so you can read that part for yourself. But once in Egypt, Thoth records all of his wisdom and keeps that knowledge in his own little man cave called the Halls of Amenti, pops the Great Pyramid on top of the entrance to hide it, and posts priests to guard it. But then he reincarnates as Hermes and writes the Reader's Digest version on 12 tablets made of an indestructible green material. Around 1300 BC, the political climate of the area gets a bit dicey, so the pyramid priests take the tablets to South America and hang out with other Atlantean disaster survivors who have settled with the Mayans, where they hang for about 2,300 years before burying the tablets under a temple around 1000 AD. A few hundred years later, the Spanish come, clear the place out, and the tablets are forgotten to history. Fast forward another 900 years when Maurice Doreal is tasked with recovering them and bringing them back to Egypt, which he does in 1925. In that return process, he is granted permission to translate and copy the text of the tablets. However, he's only granted permission from the Great White Lodge, which is a group of guides who have ascended beyond physical form, also known as the Ascended Masters, to share that information around 1940-ish when he self-publishes the book The Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. That is a condensed version of the account Maurice Doreal gives in the preface of his book as to how this whole thing went down. And everything we know about this whole affair comes from him. So, who is he? Well, let's start with the fact that Maurice Doreal is not even his real name. He's born in 1898 as Claude Doggins in Sulphur Springs, Oklahoma, the youngest of 6 children in a farming family with a deep, early interest in fantasy and science fiction. He does not attend school past elementary school and enlists in the service to fight in World War I, which is over in November of 1918. After that, his employment records show him as a department store clerk, a cab driver, and a brokerage salesman. He discovers the Emerald Tablets in 1925, gets married the first time in 1927, has 2 kids, and founds the Brotherhood of the White Temple in 1930. Is divorced by 1932, marries his second wife in 1933. This guy's busy. And heads off to LA for a while where he has a very public divorce from his second wife. She calls him a cheater, and he is pissed that she called him a fraud in front of his followers. Is that actually grounds for divorce? In 1939, he publishes the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean under the name Maurice Doreal, marries his third wife a year after that, adds the title Doctor to his name, and officially incorporates the Brotherhood as a real legal entity in Denver in 1942. In the 1950s, with a sci-fi fantasy book collection of over 30,000 books, Doreal relocates the Brotherhood to a compound in Sedalia, Colorado for protection based on his prediction of a nuclear war in 1953, calling their new digs Shambhala Ashrama. He continues on as the supreme voice for the Ascended Masters and as the leader of the Brotherhood of the White Temple, while still writing books on everything from Ascended Masters to UFOs to a reptilian race living under the Gobi Desert until his death in 1963. Now, there's nothing all that weird about this guy's life, right? I mean, whose life isn't just a little out of the ordinary? I make a living telling strange stories. Who am I to talk? But that is only the regular part of the story. Let's get to the crazy part of the story. The elementary school education? Maurice claims didn't really matter because he was born with all of the memories and education of all of his former selves. So the moment he was born, he already knew how to read and write, with his memories of math, physics, and chemistry all resurfacing before he is 1 year old. Question: if you are that smart, why are you volunteering to fight in World War I? Maybe he was just that patriotic, but it seems like the knowledge he had would convince him that maybe he was here for a higher purpose. Let's just pass on that for a minute. He also claims that he traveled to Egypt, I assume to bring the tablets back home, India, and Tibet, where he studied under the Ascended Masters for 8 years from 1921 to 1929. But when people pointed out that there was no such travel listed on his passport, those travels became astral travels. Okay. So while he's driving a cab in Wichita, his mind is in Tibet. Or maybe he goes there every day after work, like night school. Got it. But then what about his trip to South America in 1925 to recover the tablets and bring them back to the Great Pyramid? Remember, he's already told us earlier in the preface to the book about the tablets, the particular group of priests bearing the tablets emigrated to South America. I guess that was astral travel too. Except he says pretty clearly in the preface that he wrote himself that he was instructed to recover and return to the Great Pyramid the ancient tablets. This, after adventures which need not be detailed here, was accomplished. So how exactly do you recover and return physical objects astrally? And don't forget, while he's returning the tablets to Egypt, either physically or astrally, he's still studying with those masters in Tibet. Okay, now let's take a look at the tablets themselves as translated by Doreal. And despite having gotten an A in college calculus, it's true, I did. Evidently, Maurice's math skills from birth are superior to mine because the math ain't mathin'. He starts by saying there are 10 tablets that were divided into 13 sections for convenience, which is kind of odd. If Thoth really is this super powerful godlike entity, wouldn't he just make 13 tablets? But then later it says there are 12 tablets, but only 10 can be released to the world. The last 2 are far too earth-shattering. Then he goes on to write out the contents of those 10 tablets, but lists them out as 13 tablets, plus another 2 supplementary tablets for a total of 15 tablets. Are those supplementary tablets the ones that he said couldn't be released? Or are there really 10 tablets, which are actually 13 tablets, plus 2 supplemental tablets, plus the 2 that can't be released for a total of 17 tablets? And just because I feel the need,
it's a moral imperative.
I have to point out that Maurice starts the preface writing in the third person, like when he says, the writer, but by the end, he's abandoned all pretense and goes straight to first person saying, I will give an interpretation. And since when is it his interpretation? I thought it was his translation. Interesting. If you want to read the 10 or 12 or 15 or 17 tablets yourself, you can get your genuine copy straight from the Brotherhood for a mere $60. Or you can get it online for free. Go ahead and check out some of his other books while you're at it, because there are lots of goodies I don't have time to cover here. Like in his book Mysteries of Mount Shasta, published in 1943, Dr. Doreal writes that in 1931, while he's hanging out in LA giving a lecture, he's approached by 2 Atlanteans who teleport him to an underground city beneath Mount Shasta. Ooh, now we're getting spicy. But as you're reading, be aware that, at least when we're talking about the Emerald Tablets, some parts of it have already been identified as ideas lifted directly from other sources. Plagiarism, namely H.P. Lovecraft, but others as well. Not to mention that other than talking about the Emerald Tablet, which has been written about for centuries, and Thoth, who's also been written about for centuries, nothing else in the Emerald Tablets has ever been mentioned anywhere until Doreal published his book in the 1940s. Okay, I know I'm being really hard on the guy.
Cut me some slack, Jack.
Don't blame the messenger, I get it. But forgive me if I place a slightly higher standard on the guy who's supposedly delivering one of the greatest messages ever given to mankind than I put on my tax accountant who tells me I owe $8,000 to the IRS. His writings have influenced lots of people and still do today. Remember the episode we did a few weeks ago on the alleged structures under the Khufu Pyramid at Giza? Link in the description. Well, those guys even talk about the Emerald Tablets and the Halls of Amenti in their 4-hour press conference they held to talk about their scientific findings. And now that the press conference has been transcribed into English, be looking for another episode about that. I have some things to say. So, do I think the tablets exist? No. I think in both cases, they're just figments of imagination. But what about their message? Well, that's a different story. In the case of the Emerald Tablet, keep in mind, I haven't studied this text for decades like some of the alchemist masters, but it seems like someone's trying to relay a message about how the universe works. Sounds to me like a giant cosmic fractal that's identical to itself on every level. Could that information, even without being on a quest for the Philosopher's Stone, be helpful? Sure. What about the information presented in the Emerald Tablets? Well, if you set aside who the information is coming from and just concentrate on the message itself, it absolutely can be useful. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Anything that can lead us mere mortals to better understand ourselves and the world around us is a good thing in my book. And for you more adventurous souls among us who would like to take a crack at crafting your own Philosopher's Stone, but don't have the time to study centuries of alchemy to figure out how to do it, you're in luck. Somebody has done all of that for you. In 2011, a document hit the internet called the Book of Aquarius. The author is anonymous, but talks openly about their purpose for publishing it. The purpose of this book is to release one particular secret, which has been kept hidden for the last 12,000 years. The Philosopher's Stone, elixir of life, fountain of youth, ambrosia, soma, amrita, nectar of immortality. These are different names for the same thing. Inside this 165-page document are the complete instructions for creating the Philosopher's Stone. And whoever this person is, they did their homework, with quotes from various sources showered throughout, and a full bibliography of sources at the end. Everything you need to put you on the path to unlimited wealth and immortality. A link to the website and the free PDF download is in the description. But a word of warning, don't open it up until you have at least a good hour of free time in your schedule. It is quite the rabbit hole. So there it is. My attempt at bringing clarity to what was, at least for me, a very muddy subject. Two ideas with almost the same name, but two very different paths. One path leads to spiritual enlightenment and maybe even communion with the transcended masters of the Great White Lodge. Just a small heads up on this path. To truly follow it, you'll have to join the Brotherhood of the White Temple. And that's gonna cost you. Certainly not as much as that other so-called religion that shall not be named. It's actually pretty affordable, but it certainly ain't free. Or the other path that leads to immortality. Which path will you choose? Alrighty then. Yet another fire hose of information, and this one on a cosmic scale. There's so much information for you to check out on your own, so be sure to check the description for all of those links. And really, if you have some time, check out the Book of Aquarius. It is truly a trippy read. Want to keep the strange trainer rolling? Then click right here. I promise it'll be a good one. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.